In an unexpected turn of events that has set social media ablaze, the First Lady Melania Trump made a rare and memorable appearance on one of America's most-watched liberal talk shows, delivering a masterclass in grace under pressure that left both the host and audience completely stunned. The highly anticipated interview, which aired during prime time, quickly transformed from what was intended to be a challenging confrontation into a moment that will be remembered for years to come. The atmosphere in the studio was electric as Melania Trump, known for her reserved public persona, stepped onto the set wearing her signature sophisticated style, a tailored navy blue dress that exuded both confidence and elegance. The studio audience, predominantly composed of the show's regular liberal-leaning viewers, shifted uncomfortably in their seats, unsure of what to expect from this rare television appearance by the former First Lady. What started as a seemingly routine interview quickly evolved into something extraordinary. The show's host, renowned for their sharp questioning and ability to make guests squirm under pressure, clearly had an agenda. Their opening pleasantries barely masked the tension that was building in the studio, as viewers at home and in the audience could sense that something unprecedented was about to unfold. The camera caught every subtle expression as Melania settled into her seat, her posture perfect and her demeanor calm, a stark contrast to the barely contained excitement and anticipation that rippled through the studio. No one could have predicted how the next hour would unfold, or how Melania Trump would handle what was about to become one of the most talked-about television moments of the year. The interview began with what appeared to be a calculated strategy by the host to unsettle their distinguished guest. With a practiced smile that didn't quite reach their eyes, they launched into a series of increasingly provocative questions, clearly designed to elicit an emotional response from the First Lady. The host's first salvo focused on Melania's relative silence during various controversial moments of her husband's presidency. "Many have criticized your decision to remain quiet during crucial moments," the host began, leaning forward with an air of manufactured concern. "Some would say you had a moral obligation to speak out. How do you respond to those who viewed your silence as complicity?" The question hung in the air, heavy with implication, as the studio audience held their collective breath. The host, emboldened by Melania's composed demeanor, pressed further, bringing up various media headlines that had attempted to scrutinize and often criticize her marriage. They referenced unnamed sources close to the couple and questionable tabloid stories, each mention becoming more pointed than the last. The tension in the studio was palpable as the host delved into particularly sensitive topics about her role as First Lady and her relationship with her husband. "There were moments," the host continued, their voice taking on an almost theatrical tone of concern, "when many expected you to distance yourself from certain policies or statements, yet you chose to stand by your husband. Was this a choice made out of duty, or perhaps something else?" The question was clearly crafted to corner Melania, to force her into either criticizing her husband or appearing defensive. The studio lights seemed to grow brighter as the hosts continued their verbal onslaught, touching on everything from Melania's fashion choices to her accent, each question laced with subtle jabs and loaded implications. The audience watched, some with visible discomfort, as the host attempted to provoke a reaction from their guest, whose face remained remarkably serene despite the increasingly hostile line of questioning. The host's questioning took an even more personal turn as they brought up Melania's Be Best campaign, suggesting with barely concealed skepticism that it might have been at odds with her husband's social media behavior. "Some might say there was a certain irony there," the host remarked with a slight smirk, clearly expecting their guest to become defensive or show signs of discomfort. The studio audience shifted nervously as the host proceeded to display a carefully curated selection of past media headlines, each more sensational than the last. These were projected on the large screen behind them, creating a dramatic backdrop to their increasingly aggressive line of questioning. The host's voice took on an almost patronizing tone as they asked about Melania's background and her journey to becoming First Lady, with subtle implications about her motivations. "Your rise to becoming First Lady has been unconventional," the host continued, pausing for effect. "Many have questioned whether you were prepared for such a role. Looking back now, do you feel you were qualified to represent American women on the global stage?" The question was clearly designed to undermine Melania's confidence and legacy, but what happened next would leave everyone in the studio completely unprepared. Throughout this barrage of loaded questions and thinly veiled accusations, Melania maintained an almost sphinx-like composure. Her perfectly styled hair and impeccable makeup remained undisturbed, much like her dignified demeanor. The host's increasingly transparent attempts to provoke an emotional response seemed to bounce off an invisible shield of serenity that surrounded the former First Lady. As the host paused, seemingly satisfied with their barrage of provocative questions, Melania Trump's response began with a slight, knowing smile that immediately captured everyone's attention. Her voice, steady and measured, cut through the tension like a warm knife through butter. "You know," she began, her accent adding a distinctive charm to her words, "I have always believed that actions speak louder than words. While others choose to shout their virtues from rooftops, I prefer to demonstrate mine through meaningful work and genuine compassion." The studio fell completely silent, hanging on her every word. With remarkable poise, Melania addressed each accusation that had been thrown at her, but not in the defensive manner the host had clearly hoped for. Instead, she turned each potential criticism into an opportunity to showcase her strength and independence. She spoke about her time as First Lady with pride, detailing the numerous children's initiatives she had championed and the real impact of her Be Best campaign, all while maintaining her characteristic grace. "My silence, as you call it," she continued, her eyes meeting the host's directly, "was never about fear or complicity. It was about choosing my moments carefully and understanding that not every provocation deserves a response." The weight of her words seemed to settle over the studio like a blanket, and even the host appeared momentarily lost for words. When addressing the personal attacks on her marriage and background, Melania's response was particularly powerful. "I find it interesting," she said with just a hint of amusement in her voice, "that those who claim to champion women's empowerment are often the first to attempt to diminish a woman who doesn't fit their preferred narrative. My journey, my marriage, and my choices are my own. I don't need to justify them to anyone, least of all to those who have never walked in my shoes." Her response to the questions about her qualifications as First Lady was equally memorable. With quiet confidence, she detailed her multilingual abilities, her international perspective, and her understanding of global diplomacy. "Perhaps," she suggested with subtle irony, "having a First Lady who brings a worldwide perspective and speaks 5 languages was exactly what American diplomacy needed at that time." The First Lady's words carried no hint of anger or defensiveness, yet they resonated with an undeniable power. She spoke about her experiences with thoughtful reflection, occasionally even injecting moments of humor that caught the audience off guard and earned genuine laughter. Her ability to maintain composure while delivering such pointed responses left the host visibly struggling to maintain control of the interview's narrative. As she continued her response, Melania addressed the often criticized aspects of her public persona with refreshing candor. "You see," she explained, her voice carrying a hint of warmth, "being underestimated has its advantages. While critics were busy analyzing my fashion choices or questioning my silence, I was quietly working on initiatives that made real differences in children's lives." She then shared a touching story about a private visit she made to a children's hospital, away from the cameras and media attention. The way she described the impact of these moments, the genuine connections she formed with young patients and their families, revealed a side of her that rarely made headlines. "These are the moments that matter," she said, "not the Twitter storms or media speculation." The First Lady then addressed the frequent attempts to portray her as a passive figure in her marriage. With a subtle but unmistakable strength in her voice, she explained, "A strong marriage isn't about public displays or constant declarations. It's about mutual respect, understanding, and standing together through challenges. Donald and I have always been partners, each with our own strengths and roles." Her words carried particular weight as she touched on the media's often superficial coverage of her role. "It's interesting," she noted with a slight smile, "how some people confuse elegance with weakness, or mistake dignity for submission. Perhaps it says more about their prejudices than it does about me." This observation, delivered without rancor but with clear insight, caused several audience members to nod in thoughtful agreement. Throughout her response, Melania maintained an air of authenticity that seemed to resonate deeply with everyone present. She didn't just deflect the hostile questions. She transformed them into opportunities to showcase her intelligence, independence, and strength of character. The host's earlier attempts to paint her as a mere figurehead were crumbling with each measured, articulate response. The interview reached its pivotal moment when the host, seemingly frustrated by Melania's unflappable composure, decided to launch what they clearly thought would be their knockout punch. With an almost theatrical pause and a lean forward that suggested the delivery of something particularly sensational, they posed what was intended to be their most devastating question. "Mrs. Trump," the host began, their voice dripping with false sympathy, "given all the controversy, the media scrutiny, and the constant criticism, do you ever regret your marriage? Do you ever wish you had chosen a different path, one with less scrutiny and more freedom?" The question was delivered with the clear expectation of either provoking an emotional response or catching Melania in a moment of vulnerability. The studio fell into complete silence. The tension was so thick you could hear a pin drop. For a brief moment, even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. The host's satisfied smirk suggested they believed they had finally found the question that would crack Melania's composed exterior. What happened next would become one of the most talked about moments in recent television history. Melania's response came after a perfectly timed pause, delivered with a combination of grace and steel that left everyone in the studio speechless. Her eyes locked directly with the host's, and a slight smile played at the corners of her mouth. "You know," she began, her voice clear and unwavering, "it's fascinating how some people confuse happiness with their own definition of it. My marriage, my path, and my choices have given me experiences and opportunities that most can only dream of. But more importantly, they've given me the chance to make a real difference in people's lives. Do I regret that? Not for a single moment." She continued, her voice taking on an almost musical quality. "The scrutiny you mention, it's taught me strength. The criticism has shown me who my true friends are. And the constant attempts to undermine my marriage have only made it stronger. Perhaps the real question is, why are some people so invested in hoping I'm unhappy?" The host's face visibly fell as they realized their attempted gotcha moment had spectacularly backfired. Melania's response wasn't just a defense. It was a masterclass in turning the tables with elegance and wit. The audience, who had been holding their collective breath, suddenly burst into spontaneous applause, many rising to their feet in admiration of her powerful response. In that moment, the dynamic of the entire interview shifted. The host's carefully constructed narrative crumbled as Melania continued. "You see, true freedom isn't about escaping challenges. It's about facing them with courage and dignity. My path may not be conventional by your standards, but it's authentically mine, and I stand by every choice I've made." The cameras caught the host's unsuccessful attempts to regain control of the conversation, their usual confident demeanor notably shaken. Meanwhile, Melania sat there, the picture of composure, her presence commanding the room in a way that no amount of aggressive questioning could diminish. It was clear to everyone watching. This was not just a response to a loaded question. It was a defining moment that would be remembered long after the credits rolled. The impact of Melania's powerful response rippled through the studio and beyond with extraordinary speed. The studio audience, initially skeptical and reserved, had transformed into an enthusiastic crowd offering genuine appreciation. The applause that followed her words wasn't just polite. It was thunderous and heartfelt, lasting far longer than typical for the show. Social media platforms exploded with activity within minutes. Clips of the exchange began circulating rapidly, with viewers from across the political spectrum sharing and commenting on Melania's composed yet powerful performance. Hashtags like #MelaniaMoment and #FirstLadyClass quickly started trending, as people expressed their admiration for her graceful handling of the hostile interview. Even those who had historically been critical of the First Lady found themselves grudgingly impressed by her poise and eloquence. Comments flooded in praising her dignity under pressure, and her ability to maintain composure while delivering such meaningful responses. The contrast between the host's aggressive questioning and Melania's measured replies became a hot topic of discussion across various platforms. In the studio, cameras captured numerous audience members wiping away tears, moved by the authenticity and strength in Melania's words. Several were seen nodding vigorously in agreement, particularly during her comments about judging women by their own standards of success and happiness. The host's regular viewers, typically aligned with the show's liberal stance, could be seen exchanging looks of surprised respect. The show's producers, sensing the shifting mood in the studio, quickly adjusted their camera angles to capture the overwhelming positive response from the audience. Even the most hardened critics in the crowd seemed touched by Melania's genuine and heartfelt responses, especially during her discussion of her charitable work and personal values. The interview that began as an attempted takedown of Melania Trump instead became a powerful lesson in handling adversity with grace and dignity. Through her measured responses and unwavering composure, the First Lady demonstrated that true strength often manifests not in loud declarations or defensive reactions, but in calm, thoughtful discourse. This memorable television moment served as a reminder that in our increasingly polarized world, the most effective response to hostility isn't always to match its intensity. Melania Trump's approach, turning provocative questions into opportunities for meaningful discussion, showcased how wisdom and poise can triumph over antagonism. The lasting impact of this interview extends beyond political lines, offering a masterclass in maintaining one's dignity under pressure. It reminded viewers that authentic character and quiet confidence often speak louder than rehearsed aggression. In an era of divisive rhetoric and confrontational media, Melania's performance stood as a testament to the enduring power of grace under fire. Perhaps most importantly, this interview revealed that true strength lies not in the ability to attack, but in the capacity to rise above provocation while staying true to one's principles. The First Lady's composed yet powerful responses will likely be remembered as a defining moment in political discourse, demonstrating how measured words and unwavering dignity can bridge even the widest of ideological divides. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Together, we can keep spreading stories that remind us of the power of compassion and second chances.